My name is David Hausman, and I am a big Milanoff fan. I come from New York. I come from the Lower East Side. When I came from it, it was sort of a shtetl. The life I grew up in was sort of Fiddler on the Roof without the Cossacks. But somehow I got interested in the world of opera. My background was in Jewish theater. I got interested in the opera. I came to it via the Met broadcasts, which were a lifeline to me because I wasn't interested in anything else on the Lower East Side. So I came to the opera broadcast, and then in the mid-50s I became a standee at the old Metropolitan Opera, and I have wonderful memories about it. And most of the good memories include these two people who are sitting here, who will meet in a few minutes. We spent a long time on the rails waiting for them to open the doors so we could buy a standing room ticket so we can go in and stand some more. It was a world unto itself, and most of us developed friendships. I'm lucky this one has lasted a long time, even though we argued about our favorite singers, and some of the arguments got very, very virile, bitter, and vociferous. But what the hell else are you going to do standing on the line? It was bad enough during the week, but we used to stand a lot on the Sunday. They used to do Sunday performances, and a lot of them were benefits. So we'd get on line 11 o'clock in the morning and stand till 7 o'clock till those louses opened the door and sold the tickets. And I used to go inside because my toes would lose feeling. It was freezing there in the winter. And then you get inside and they'd still give you a hard time. And one time, I don't know, it was freezing cold. I was wearing a heavy stadium coat with toggles. And in those days, the man had to wear a shirt and a tie and a suit. And they wouldn't let one guy in because he was wearing a blazer and poplin pants or something. I get up to the window, and he says to me, "What are you wearing?" And I'd been standing in the cold for 6 hours, and this idiot says to me, "What are you wearing?" I turned to him and I said, "I'm wearing basic black and pearls." He looked at me, and he gave me the damn ticket. I said, "Mille grazia, a vostra sante." And I think Catherine was standing next to me because I was getting ready to tell him, "A te la mala Pasqua" on you. But we went into the house and we saw the performance.
Okay, good.
Okay, so on that note, this is my friend for many, many years and my fellow standee, Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine Arturi Seco. Most people know me by Catherine Arturi, who may be listening to this. I actually started out, I am from Jersey City, and I made a trip to Italy with my mother back in 1953. And we were visiting my uncle, and my mother wanted to go to the opera, to the San Carlo. And she did not know that the San Carlo did not perform during the summer. And we went to the box office, and they suggested that we go to a place called La Fiera dell'Oltremare. And that evening, as I recall quite clearly, was La Gioconda with Anna Di Cavalieri, Fedora Barbieri, and Gianni Poggi, with Tullio Serafin in the pit. And I remember very little of the performance itself, except I remember this man waving his arms in the orchestra pit. I was really only 12 years old. And when I looked into the program, later on in the years, it was Tullio Serafin. And the other night, and that night I remember very clearly, it was extremely cold. And I've told that to my husband many times, that's what I remember, 1953. And we can go forward, 1955, it was a New Year's Day. We were having New Year's dinner at my aunt's house downstairs from where we all lived in the same house in Jersey City. And my brother, who was named, people on the line knew him as Tony Arturi. We always called him Anthony in my family. And he said to me, "I think I would like to go to see Licia," meaning Licia Albanese, "sing tonight, Traviata." And it was January 1st, 1955. It was an evening broadcast. And the reason why it was an evening broadcast is because the Rose Bowl was on during the day. And that was my first introduction to the Metropolitan Opera. at the old Opera House between 39th and 40th Street on Broadway. And that night it was Licia Albanese as Violetta and Giacinto Prandelli as Alfredo. And the following week, I saw Madame Butterfly with Albanese and Prandelli. And then sometime in March of that same year, I saw Bohème with Albanese and Eugene Conley. And as they say, the rest is history.
My name is Bill Seco. I am married to this lovely woman that just finished speaking. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. Grew up there for most of my life. My background is primarily musical. I come from a very musical family. On my mother's side, both my grandfather and uncle were professional musicians. They both played for the silent films. One was a pianist, the other played the flute and the clarinet. My mother was a semi-professional dancer. I started music lessons at a fairly early age of 7. Did a lot of competing locally, actually won some too, all the way up through, I guess, the age of about 13 when I switched instruments and took up brass playing. Again, my initial introduction to music was purely instrumental until one evening during the 40s. It was a Tuesday evening. I'll never forget this. I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I was watching the Milton Berle show, and I was sitting there watching it, and This gentleman appeared on the stage. Milton Berle made his usual introductions, and this gentleman appeared on the stage in a clown suit and proceeded to sing what I thought then was just a magnificent rendition of Vesti la Juba. Well, that tenor was Kurt Baum. No, again, I was about 8.
Vesti la Juba che la faccia infarina, la gente paga per rider vuole guai, solletin che invola Colombina, ridi pagliaccio e ognuno applaudirà.
So at any rate, my reaction to that was very positive, unlike later instances. And my father's side of the family, while they were not musicians, were very, very interested in music, and particularly my aunt, who had season tickets at the Met and would take me from that point on Tuesday evenings whenever her partner was unable to go. But prior to that, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, a few years later there appeared at Radio City Music Hall a gala festive production of The Great Caruso with Mario Lanza. And so I was taken to that, and I much preferred him to Kurt Baum.
Vesti la giubba e la faccia infarina, la gente paga e ridere vuole guai, se Arlecchino d'invola Colombina, ridi pagliaccio e ognuno applaudirà.
And that kind of started it. And then I used to nag her every other week to take me to the opera. And my earliest recollection of a performance, which was a Valkyrie with Harshaw, Svanholm, Varney, Hotter's Only Wotan. The Hunding, I believe, was Lubin Vichy. I believe. It's quite a few years ago now. And so I was pretty much relied on my parents or my aunt to take me to the opera until I got to high school.
I think that's Harshaw's only Linda.
It may be.
She sang Brunhilde later in the season. She got the record for that, but I think she only sang Linda once.
I was
You're talking about almost 60 years ago.
I was 12.
Really?
No, you were 14.
14.
Yeah, 14.
At any rate, enter stage right, high school, and I discovered the 118 bus to Port Authority in New York from East Orange, where we were then living. So what I would do is get out of school at 3:15, jump the 21 Orange bus down to public service in Newark, and for you New Yorkers or whomever I'm speaking to around the country, that was the standard way one got to New York. It was public service to New York. And I would jump the 118 bus, and which let me out of Port Authority, and I would walk over to the Met and get on the standing room line. Now, I didn't know anybody, and I was very, very young. But it was pretty easy to make friends there. I, in point of fact, met my wife's brother there. He was one of my first friends, and he introduced me to a number of other people, and it was at that point that I started seeing between 60 and 80 performances a year. As time went on, my friend Tony Arturi would bring this girl with him to the opera, who was named Catherine, and I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but it really did happen. We met there and ultimately got married a number of years later. So that's pretty much my introduction, and that's the preface to my standing room days, which got a lot more interesting later on. But at any rate, that's pretty much how it all began for me. Both.
Singers. That's
I don't like any of your singers.
Your taste hasn't improved since Kurt Baum and Pagliacci, so shut up. God. He hates everybody I like. Actually, Kurt Baum provided a service for a long time. There was nobody there to sing the Italian dramatic tenor role, so to speak. He was it. If you didn't have Kurt, you wouldn't have had a lot of performances. And they laugh at him. But look, and they laughed at Harshaw too. But look around what we have now. Those people would be considered big stars now. We have people who can't hold a candle to them and couldn't get through a performance. Baum delivered the goods in a lot of performances. He wasn't my first one. I saw Milanov. I think the first time was in Hernani with Delmonico. I mean that was a world unto itself. Mario had a voice the size of a volcano. He was about 5'2" or 5'4", and he wore platform shoes 3 feet high like Carmen Miranda. And he would get rigid on the high notes. If you would touch him, he'd probably fall over. But he sang, and the sound reverberated in the house.
Purché sulla tua beniso venga brillare il riso, gli stenti suoi le pene e Hernani spordera. Gli stenti suoi le pene Hernani spordera.
Baum couldn't do that, but Mario couldn't sing every night. And Baum came along, and you needed him. That Hernani was in a lot of ways my introduction. It was the first time I heard Zinka Milov in the Opera House. I'd been hearing her for years. It was the most gorgeous voice I ever heard. It was like velvet. It was rich and dark and thick. And I am addicted to the women singers with dark voices, Milanov and Barbieri. And don't say anything, Bill, because I'll hit you here. Barbieri, Elmo, Circassian, Madeira, the dark voices. And I saw this woman in person. It was an incredible sound. It was her, it was Delmonico, it was Warren, and it was Siepi, and it was grand opera, wonderful.
Tutti cadrete, da volto si divida, solo che conti avuta, prigion sia i volga, ad abili la scure, e reca d'un ferre, mal che a me io son conte, duca sono, disse Gorbi e di Cardona, Don Giovanni d'Aragona, riconosco ognuno in me, porti patria e genitore, discherai pentitore, e un uccisi abbandono. Questo capo, il tron cauve, si cadrà con altri avvezzi. faccia donna.
And then I
You
started
left out
going back.
Blanche.
What?
You left out Blanche.
Blanche didn't sing that night.
Oh, you're just talking about the Unani, you mean?
I'm talking about, Blanche was a wonderful mezzo. She was a light of voice. She was a very
No, I know
elegant
she's a
woman.
favorite of yours. That's
She
why
was. She was a very elegant woman. She was magnificent and ebony and marine and all that. But she was a lighter one of the voices, and I loved her too. And I saw her for many, many years. She was so dramatic on stage. She had a way with capes. The one thing I remember about Blanche, she had hair down to the ground, almost 5.5
Yeah, she
feet
did.
long, and she wore it out. And there was a Samson performance. She wore it out, and the guy singing Samson knelt on it, and she couldn't stand up. It was good for a laugh. But Blanche, but
I think that was Mario, as a matter of fact. No, Vinay.
probably
was Vinay, yeah.
But I saw that, and then later I went back, and I think the next performance I saw was Milanoff in Aida. And that was the year Jeffrey Holder. Does anybody remember
Jeffrey Holder?
Yes.
Jeffrey Holder was about 7 feet tall. He did some of these commercials for coffee. You remember him?
He was a Jamaican calypso singer and dancer.
All right. He was about 7 feet tall, and he was wearing white ostrich plumes. That was his costume. He looked like Josephine Baker wearing ostrich plumes. And
She wore bananas.
okay, he wore plumes. It made him look 8 feet tall. Now that year, Antonietta Stella sang the first 2 or 3 Aidas, so Zinka did not do the dress or anything else. And Zinka's on stage, and she's had this scene, and they're doing the triumphal scene, and she's standing there, and they bring out this shield with this 7-foot man in white ostrich plumes. She looked at him like she couldn't believe it. And she kept looking at him through the whole triumphal. Who is he? And then they carried him away, and she looked into the wings. Where was they taking him? And she went on to sing. By the next Aida, she was used to it. But he was a very good dancer, and it was an interesting Aida between her and him. And then I went back for many performances after that.
Well, Tommy Tune was 6'6".
He wasn't singing on the stage of the Metropolitan with most of these singers who were 5'3" and 5'4".
There were some taller ones who came on later on.
Yeah, but that was before. But then I kept going back and back. My favorite opera came to be Gioconda. I think I saw every Gioconda from about 56 on.
Cielo e mar, le terre overo, splende come un santo altar.
Till the time Milanoff retired. A lot of them with Kurt Baum, as a matter of fact. But who cared? He got through the Enzo. And I listened to some of these broadcasts from the Met. He's good. I mean, he does a damn good job.
Let me rewind this a little bit. I first of all, certainly that wasn't my intention to denigrate Kurt Baum. As David said, he performed a valuable service there, and he, in point of fact, in my humble estimation, was a very good singer. I'm afraid the quality of his voice was what was against him, but he was by no means a favorite of mine. But I had a lot of respect for him. And I had a lot of respect for what he did, because he would step in on very short notice when larger lights just chose not to be available and give a very serviceable performance. I have a lot of respect for that, but he was, by no means a favorite of mine. And he was there for many, many years, and again, to repeat myself, performed a very valuable service for both Johnson and Bing.
But I think in this day and age, he would be a much bigger star. I mean, he's better than most of what we have out there these days.
Describing visually.
He looked like an amphora. That's a Greek vase with two handles on each side, with a short neck and a big. Now that's not my quote. That's George Bernard Shaw's, but it does describe Kurt Baum. At any rate, rewinding back even further, if you'll indulge me, my lovely wife has said that she described her first performance at La Fiera di Oltremare, which happened to have been in August, by the way. It was still freezing.
It's cold.
But I was looking at. I'm a collector of programs, playbills, and, if you will, pirated performances. And as I was going through sort of organizing and sorting, I found this Gioconda program. And I'm thumbing through it, and I had seen that Di Stefano had sung the prima the night before. She came the second night and saw Poggi. However, I said to her, Catherine, can you come down? We have a studio in our basement. There's sort of a musical studio. There's all our recording equipment, blah, 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 and paraphernalia's there. And I said, you saw Tullio Serafin conduct? And she said, yes. I said, I never did.
It's true.
She's held that over me ever since.
He wasn't conducting in the Met or in America by the time you were going.
No,
he was the mainstay in the Italian stages.
He was Toscanini's assistant in like 1922, 23.
And now you're going to tell me he's a hack also.
Well, I'll tell you. No, don't get me started about that, because he was a master with the scissors, okay? Call him Signor Forbici, because the cuts that he made in Italian opera are just disgraceful, okay? I love the Angel series. I love Maria. Where would we be without EMI? But the cuts he made in Puritani, Sonnambula, Norma, and I can go on and on and on, are disgraceful. And he didn't make them because she couldn't sing them. Okay, so I have no use for him because of that.
That's the way the opera was done in those days.
No, that's the way he did them.
No,
okay?
I think that's the way it was done in general.
No, I don't agree.
He made cuts over and above everybody else's.
Oh, of course. I mean, listen to that Sonnambula. Listen to the Sonnambula, the famous Sonnambula. Be it Cologne, be it Edinburgh, be it Scala, you name it, okay? And then listen to what the Met opened up for Flores 2 years ago.
All right, but
okay?
that comes after Boning. Boning opened up most of the cuts.
No, he did not. No, sir.
He
did not. He opened up what he chose to open up for Joan.
Sutherland,
For
right,
Joan.
right.
Okay, but you couldn't let Serafin loose with his scissors near a score without having it come out and shred. Get him a shredder. I mean, it's just. I find it infuriating because I do a lot of editing of old tapes that I made during the 50s of Met broadcasts and things like that. And I always work with a score. And I mean, it's just, well, it's just disgraceful. It really
How much
is.
of it is because of him or because there were singers who couldn't sing the parts?
Well, it's not because
Well,
it was
it was
Maria.
certainly- it was-
I'm not
because
talking
it was
about
certainly-
Carlos,
it
but I'm
wasn't
talking about
Carlos.
people that Carlos sang with.
Yeah,
What,
well,
Di Stefano, Bastianini,
Yeah, it-
Simeonato, they couldn't sing.
That wasn't because
Zaccaria?
She also sang
I mean-
with Piero Morano, Fernando, and several others of lesser quality.
He sang,
You
she
should
sang
get
one
that.
performance with him.
Pirata. It's on.
That
disc.
doesn't
It's on disc.
that doesn't happen to be his transcription. Okay, he's not the one that did those cuts. Okay, and by the way, she couldn't sing them by then. Okay,
You mean the Pirata in 59?
in '59, yeah,
At Carnegie Hall?
yeah.
She went in and out too. She went hot and cold with a lot of people.
Her best friend of all these singers and all these conductors was Simeonato. Okay, they remained friends until Carlos's death, and she's the only one who ever called Simeonato Giulia, because Simeonato's real first name is Giulia. It's not Giulietta, I don't know how she got Giulietta, but her name is Julia. And if you go up on the websites and see where she's buried, now
Probably
it's
says
in Rome.
Julia?
It says Julia. Yes. It
Well,
says
they were
that.
friends from South America.
They were friends till Carlos's death.
If
in
you
77.
listen to those Proc variations that she recorded on RAI in 1951, okay, those hold no terrors for her whatsoever.